Hi, and welcome to this screencast that will take the place of your regular class on Friday the 13th. So happy Friday the 13th to you. Hope you're having a good day. First of all, I want to apologize. I know my schedule has been very kind of hectic during the last couple of weeks here because of the tennis. I've been missing a few classes here and there. So I do appreciate your patience with me, and I do appreciate your willingness to engage in these blended learning experiences, and I hope that it proves valuable to you, and I hope it's a good replacement for the classes that I've missed. So what we are going to look at today is the Hellenistic culture. And for those of you that are labeling your notes, this is section 5 in chapter 5. So this is 5.5. This is the last section in our chapter on Greece. So this is Hellenistic culture. And again, we'll get this PowerPoint rolling here, and we'll see what we can come up with. So again, this is Hellenistic culture, chapter 5, section 5. And the first thing that we need to notice here is that there's a difference between Hellenic and Hellenistic. We really haven't talked a whole lot about Hellenic culture or society before, but Hellenic is basically your average Greek society. The Greek name for Greece, what the Greeks call their own country, is Hellas, Hellas. And out of that we get Hellenic. So all the culture and the society that we've been talking about before in class, whether it's Athens, Sparta, Socrates, the playwrights, whatever it might be, that's part of Hellenic culture, the first bullet point here. Hellenistic culture is a little bit different. That is the culture that emerges in the period after Alexander the Great. Obviously, when Alexander the Great conquered a lot of these territories that he did, he took the Greek culture with him. So when he conquered these territories, he brought Greek culture with him. And as a result, this Greek culture mixed with the local culture, whether that be Persian culture when he took over Persia, or Indian culture when he took over India, or whatever it might be. And this mix of Greek and, let's say, Persian, for instance, this mix of Greek and Persian cultures ends up being a Hellenistic culture. So a Hellenistic culture is a mix of Greek and some other cultures, Persian, Indian primarily, but some other ones as well. So that's the difference between Hellenic and Hellenistic. If we then look at the two of the major characteristics of the Hellenistic culture, we can first note that the Hellenistic culture is very optimistic. The Hellenic culture, especially towards the end of the Peloponnesian War and going into the kind of power vacuum that existed after the Peloponnesian War, had been relatively dark, relatively pessimistic. This changes when we have Alexander and the creation of the Hellenistic culture. The Hellenistic culture is very optimistic. It has a kind of a positive outlook on life, and it deals with topics such as how do you create the most happy human beings, how do you create a society that is best suited for happy human beings, etc., etc. The other thing that's noteworthy about the Hellenistic culture is the fact that women have a different role. In the Hellenic culture, with the exception of Sparta, of course, but in the Hellenic culture, women did not have a very high status. We know that in Athens they were not allowed to leave the house without a male chaperone. They couldn't own property, they couldn't divorce, etc., etc. This changes in the Hellenistic culture, and women become much more appreciated, and they achieve a much higher status. In most of these territories that Alexander took over, women could own property, they could divorce, they were even in some societies allowed to hold official positions within the government, etc., etc., which is a huge difference compared to the Hellenic culture. So those are some of the major differences between the Hellenic and the Hellenistic culture. The last thing that we'll look at here are three philosophical movements that emerged during the Hellenistic era. And the first one is the Cynic movement. And I want to point out here that in our modern day English language, we kind of have a different understanding or meaning of the word cynic. As you might know, a cynic is someone who does not have a very high opinion of humans, who believes that humans do not act out of goodness, but instead act out of ulterior motives. So, for instance, if I do a favor for you, a cynic would say, I'm just doing that favor because I want a favor in return, or whatever it might be. This was a little different back in ancient Greece and the Middle East during the Cynic movement. The founder of the Cynic movement was a man called Diogenes. And Diogenes argued that humans are a little bit too focused on material things, kind of in a similar fashion to Buddha. So what Diogenes suggested was that we need to live our lives in as simple of a fashion as possible, so that happiness is found through simplicity. Life should be as simple as possible. Now, Diogenes was a bit of a different character. He kind of took this to its extreme. He actually gave away all his possessions and lived his life as a beggar. And for that, he was often very ridiculed, and people kind of made fun of him a lot. And there's this story about Diogenes, or we are actually fairly certain that it did happen because there's been many different accounts of it. He would walk around with a lamp. And when people would walk up to him, they would say, Diogenes, well, what are you doing? Why are you walking around with a lamp? And he would say, I'm just trying to find an honest man. So Diogenes, through some of the kind of bad treatment that he received from people, kind of lost faith in a lot of humanity. And that's where our word for cynic comes from. Now, the followers of Diogenes did not take it as far as he did. So most of his students and most of his followers just try to simplify their lives. They did not give away their possessions. They did not make a living by begging for food, etc., etc. They just try to simplify their lives. And it was quite a popular movement during the Hellenistic age. The next major kind of philosophical movement here is something called Epicureanism. And the people that believed in Epicureanism argued that humans are too involved in public life. We are out in the public too much. We become too invested in what other people are doing. We care too much about what other people are saying and thinking. Instead, we should focus more inward on ourselves. And we should not worry so much about what the outside world does. The Epicureanists also believe that we should try to avoid pain as much as possible and seek pleasure. And we should note here that there is a kind of a limit to this. This doesn't mean that you should just try to have a great life and do all fun things at all times. Instead, you should try to seek out things that do make you happy and that make people around you happy. So there was a way to make society a better society and a happier society. The other thing that the Epicureanists believed in very firmly was the harmony of body and mind. They basically argued that you have to have a balance between physical activity and mental activity. If you do too much physical activity, if you're out in warfare, fighting battles all the time, and you don't really reflect on society, you're not going to be happy. On the other hand, if all you're doing is sitting on the couch, thinking about yourself, thinking about your life, not doing any physical activity, then you won't be happy either. So there needs to be a harmony there, kind of a notion of balance. And then lastly, we'll turn to something that's fairly similar to Epicureanism called Stoicism. And Stoicism was founded by a man named Zeno. And basically the Stoics argued that we as humans need to live in harmony with nature, kind of in a similar fashion to Taoism, although not as kind of loosely organized as Taoism. The Stoics believe that passion is a major problem in our society at that time. What they meant by passion was that they said, sure, you can be passionate about things. You should be passionate about the people you love. You should be passionate about your job, etc., etc. But it's when passion goes overboard that humans engage in bad actions. So again, it goes back to this notion of balance. You should never be too passionate about something, because if you do, it will have bad consequences for you. So for instance, to give a modern day example, if you're very passionate about, I don't know, let's say candy. You're really passionate about candy, you love candy. Obviously, if you have too much passion for candy, you eat too much candy, that will end up with bad results for you. So that's kind of a modern analogy to that. So that is it for this little screencast, just around 10 minutes long, and I hope that this has made total sense to you. If it hasn't, please jolt down any questions that you might have, and we'll go over those on Tuesday. Tuesday will be a review day to get you ready for your test on the block day of next week. Most importantly, I hope that you have a great Friday. Enjoy your 3-day weekend, and we will see you on Tuesday.